Hey friends, Jonathan Saenz, President of Texas Values. I'm here on the floor at NRB 2025, day 2. All right, and I think this actually might be the busiest day. There's a lot of activity. Like me, a lot of people kind of flew into town or drove into town yesterday, but things are rocking. There's a great vibe. I saw David Barton, Eric Metaxas, all the superstars are here. But this is the biggest event, international event for religious freedom, for broadcasting, messaging, media, and it's right here in Texas. So I made this short trip up 35 from Austin, and I ran into my good friend, Erin Brownback. We're going to talk with her today. She's been involved in a lot of wonderful work, and we're going to learn a little bit more about that work, but also some things that she cares about individually that matter, that are so important to the pro-family movement. But just a little bit about Erin. She is a strategic communication expert. That's what I think. You're definitely in the expert category. And she runs her own company, Brownback Strategies. You know, likely you've seen some of her work, but you may not have known it. So many of the Christian conservatives, the values organizations, the national and state level have had the benefit of her services over the years. And we've got to run into each other from time to time at like the RNC and other big events. You know, when's the last time I saw you sitting next to the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, at RNC Milwaukee. You certainly, have a strategy that works for being in the right places, but also the right message. So welcome. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for having me. Thank you to Texas Values and for all of the great work that you're doing. And I just have to say, the speaker had the best food in his box. So that's how I kind of that's how I make my choices of where I sit.
Well, and look, that was an incredible event. I mean, there was just, the energy was through the roof. I mean, Milwaukee, this was 2 or 3 days after President Trump was almost assassinated. I mean, you could just cut the emotion and the energy and stuff with a knife. And then he actually showed up. He's got the bandage on his ear. Wow, and I brought my son the last day. It was an experience I'll never forget. But the speaker had not been, I don't think he'd been in that position all that long, getting settled in. And as quickly, not that he wasn't before, but has certainly asserted and established himself as a very strong friend and ally to President Trump. And I think that's going to be key moving forward. But let's talk about your work a little bit. I know, and I want, as we kind of go through the interview, I want to learn a little bit more about you, have our audience learn a little bit more about you. But, look, I run a family policy council at the state level, but I work with the other groups around the state and some national organizations. Tell us a little bit about what is strategic communication. So when you're involved in the equation of the values movement, where would that be, and where are your touches that people might see?
Absolutely, thanks. So I do strategic messaging, like you said. Brownback Strategies is my company. I work with a lot of different organizations, and I'll tell you, my history is in having been a communications director at Alliance Defending Freedom. And one of the keys about ADF is that they are an alliance-building organization. So that just opened up the opportunity for me to have these relationships with incredible organizations like Texas Values, who over the years have brought me in to do strategic messaging. And what I mean by that, the first thing that I do with organizations is I audit all of their messaging to figure out, what are they actually saying? A lot of people don't realize what their organization is saying about themselves. And then the second thing is we create an impact plan. So we really clearly identify, what does this organization do? Texas Values does a lot of things. And it's sometimes hard to be able to articulate that in a very simple message, sometimes in an image. And from that impact plan, then we develop strategic messaging, main and supporting messaging that undergirds everything you do. Nobody should ever have to sit in front of a blank page and figure out, what am I going to say in this speech? Everybody should have messaging that they can work from. So I do that for lots of great organizations, nonprofit, for-profit, but my heart is especially in this conservative and Christian movement, and particularly on the issues that relate to God's design for the family, the pro-family movement, as I like to call it.
No, that's absolutely right. And you don't hear it stated that way as often. It used to hear pro-family a lot more. Sometimes you still do values. I mean, you'll hear different words that people put together to communicate and describe this movement. But I think that's a fair way to state it too. That we look at some of the logos that we have, right? Faith, family, and freedom. We borrowed that from Tony Perkins at Family Research Guys. Matter of fact, if you look at their logo, they've got the U.S. Capitol, and it says faith, family, and freedom. Ours is the Texas Capitol, and so we just try to keep it simple. and look, but also use what works, right? So I'm curious, we're at this international event, right? There's, media outlets and personalities and important people. I mean, there's, Christian leaders all over this incredibly huge hall at the Gaylord Texan here in Grapevine. And I have seen, I don't want to say an explosion, maybe, of all of these type of people and entities in the Christian broadcasting media market for the past 10 years, maybe longer. And I think that's good. From your vantage point, what do you see, and is there clear evidence that there's a lot more activity and maybe actually the message is getting across to people?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, here at National Religious Broadcasters, people might not realize there are over 5,000 broadcasters here at this conference. And like you said, it's not only national, but it is international. There are all of the movie makers and the TV producers and the authors and the radio show hosts. So this is a huge movement of messaging our values, which is critical. Just indulge me for a second. If you go way back in history, there was a time at which the church had sort of become corrupt, and when Martin Luther, they led a push to kick things out of the church, and one of them was theater. Theater had been in the church was corrupt, and they kind of said, we need to get rid of all of these corrupt pieces. Well, we lost communicating through entertainment hundreds of years ago, and now you see this huge push. You see Kingdom Stories, you see the Harmon Brothers, you see this huge push, The Chosen, to communicate entertainment that we care about. And to your point, in the political arena, we have voices who have been communicating, especially over these last 4 years, how unhappy people have been. And I think that has really been a rallying cry that produced this tremendous support for Donald Trump in this last election. So, yeah, I think not only groups like yours, but the broadcasters have been really communicating out the message that we've been needing.
Well, and, just so people know, The Chosen is taped here in Texas, not far from here, just a little bit west of here. I drove by their studios a while back. I was in the area, and someone said, hey, if you go this way, and something that, we're proud about as Texans, talking about pro values. You've done some incredible work. We've done a lot of work on the Save Women's Sports issues, the gender issues, however people want to shortcut the way that you describe it. But you and I were talking recently, and Riley Gaines is a huge Save Women Sports leader, probably the most identified, a great friend of Texas Values. As a matter of fact, she's going to be speaking at our Faith and Family Day next week at the Texas Capitol, Thursday, March 6th. Come to that event. It's going to be incredible. But you had an opportunity to work with a female athlete as well, and you had a big impact. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So obviously, Riley was not the only person who swam against William Thomas, who goes by Leah. There were many other females who were affected by that. And one of them that I did some strategic messaging with and then media training on that messaging was Kylie Alon's. And Kylie's story was that she swam against William Thomas in tournaments. And in a tournament, as you know, it goes on all day long. Well, because of that, they are changing in and out of their swimsuits in the locker room. And think about this. This is a swimsuit. This is not a jersey. This is not knee pads. This is not something where there is anything underneath. And William was in there changing in and out of his swimsuit, as was Kylie. And so she ended up changing in the janitor's closet. And that's her story. So, she was put into the closet because of this gender confusion, and her comfort, her safety was not protected in that situation.
I was so interested when you were telling me the story about this recently, because these personal stories can make such a huge difference in the work that you do. I'm sure a lot of times you focus on that, helping getting someone's story out there so people can appreciate it, but it also lets people realize there are real people whose lives are impacted in a significant way when these kind of things continue to go on and we're not doing something about it. How humiliating to have to go into the closet, which is already a stressful time. You're in the middle of some major competition, right? And Riley Gaines told us one time in an interview, it could take up to an hour sometimes to put on the swimsuit. It's not just any swimsuits. When they're competitive at the collegiate level, they're super tight. Anyway, that just is more time that these athletes would have to spend next to a guy that's exposing himself. And that's going to be a big issue at the Texas legislature that we're working on as well. I know the life issue, big issue that you care about, that you've worked on, and I do as well. And just great couple of years that we've been through recently, right? Dobbs v. Jackson, overturning Roe v. Wade. So the pro-life, there's been a lot to celebrate. There's a lot of joy in babies that have been saved. But I know that's an issue with, as it pertains to exposing Planned Parenthood, that you've been a big part of us. Tell us about some of your work on that.
So I had the fortunate opportunity at Alliance Defending Freedom early on to do some of the first qualitative and quantitative message testing on the public perception of Planned Parenthood. And we tested to see what audiences around the country would respond to as far as the main messaging about Planned Parenthood. And what we saw was that they were very moved by the business strategy of Planned Parenthood. So they were moved by the fact that Planned Parenthood targets children to create customers. So they target children with their sexual content, pornography in schools, like you all have worked on. Second, they enforce abortion quotas. So
Johnson's confirmed that as well.
yes, they have abortion quotas for every one of their regions. They have to hit a certain number of abortions. Third, they waste and abuse taxpayer dollars. That actually was fourth. Number three is that they keep their overhead low by keeping their medical standards low, which keeps women at risk. And you've seen that. You've seen the things that come out that say there's bloody refuse in the tables, and they're just churning women through. So when people saw the business model of Planned Parenthood, it was just egregious to them. And then you've seen the ripple effects of that messaging through the years. The Planned Parenthood sells baby parts, the different things that have come out that demonstrate Planned Parenthood is a business. They have said being a nonprofit is a tax status. It's not a business status. We've got to keep our doors open. And when a woman chooses to parent or let her child be adopted, we make no money. And so that's been, their driving force has been the money.
And you shared with me on the positive or more encouraging side a desire that you have about maybe a different way, or you've tried some of this, of messaging in a way that relates to women. It relates to, I forget, you'll remind me here, about a strategy about making certain things either unattractive or attractive in this movement. Tell me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you study the pro-life movement, you see lots of different warriors on this front, right? It's a very personal issue. It's a life and death issue. So everybody has their own approach. Some people are abortion abolitionists. I think about Kristen Hawkins from Students for Life. She has worked to make that word tied to the abortion issue because she wants to abolish it like slavery. There are people who want to make abortion unnecessary. If you think about Democrats for Life, they work to have changing stations and nursing stations and things like that, college campuses and different places. Everybody has their own approach. I have my own approach, Jonathan. As you know, this reflects my personality, which is I choose to make to work to make abortion unattractive.
I love it.
So I think that people are attracted to attractive things. So I like to go to all the places where they're doing, walks for life and marches for life, and find the most attractive people and take pictures of them holding the cutest signs, and then let the world know this is what the pro-life movement looks like. It's young, it's happy, it's healthy.
Okay, well, speaking of something attractive, that's sort of a segue. You've got a cute little book here about the life issue. Tell us about this.
Okay, so this is my children's book that I created called Before Cherry Street. Show you a little bit of the inside here, just really fun. And it's about a little boy who asks his mom, "Where did I live before I lived here?" And she says,
Here, I'll hold the mic for you. So you
oh,
hold the
good,
book.
good. Yeah, I'll find you one of my favorite pages. Okay, I love this page. So she says to him, "Well, we lived in the apartment on Cherry Street." And he says, he remembers it, and he says, "Well, where did I live before that?" It's called Before Cherry Street. And she says, "Well, you lived in Mommy's belly." And he says, "What? How did I fit in there? And what did I do all day?" So she goes through every stage of gestation with him, And she describes how the child he was in the womb is just like the child he is now, but now he's bigger and more developed. So he kicked in the womb, and then he's a soccer player now, and he sucked his thumb in the womb, and then he sucked his thumb as a child. And each page gives you what is happening in that stage of gestation. So the baby has eyelashes or dreams or has taste buds. So that was my way of communicating to children before they became aware of even what abortion was, that life is a continuum and it begins in the womb, and we're all developing and continuing to grow.
And look, we're talking about babies. I mean, kids are naturally curious, right? This is exactly what would happen. A lot of times there's another baby coming along, and so the kid's asking about mom's, pregnant, and what does all that mean? And so I think it fits really well, and it gives people an opportunity to have some content that is positive. I think that's attractive, to borrow your word, because there's so much stuff out there. You mentioned the pornography in schools, so much stuff, content now that is, things that we don't want our kids exposed to, and we can replace it, instead of that, have things like this. Okay, let's look again. Before Cherry Street, can you find it online?
CherryStreet.com.
People, before CherryStreet.com. So listen, you've done a lot of great work, and I've been excited to see how that's developing. A lot of times you're behind the scenes, though. You're doing great in front of the camera today, just so you know. But I do think we're in a moment where people on the life movement, they're looking to figure out what's next, and I'm sure you'll be a part of that. And I know it's an issue that you care about, and your heart's there. As we conclude, tell us just, if you can, yourself, what motivates you to do all this incredible work for 20 years, or however long you've been involved in?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So you would think if my passion is the pro-family movement that I would have a family of my own, but I never have. I've always wanted to, and for whatever reason, God has worked through me to promote his design for the family. I was blessed to be surrounded by family growing up. I have been blessed to be folded into wonderful families, but I also know, because I study the rise and fall of nations, that nations fall when their family structure collapses. It is the building block of society. And I know that family is the reflection of the Trinity, and Satan wants to disintegrate the reflection of the Trinity. So I'm passionate about God's design for the family, because I think he has created that as our best way to come to know him. And I'm passionate about protecting America's future by having strong families as our building blocks.
And that's a little tutorial on how to message well. No surprise, but Erin Brownback is a strategic communications expert. Her company is Brownback Strategies, and we're so thankful that she was our guest today on this special segment of the Texas Values Report right here at NRB 2025.